Magdalena Bay, which is down south in Baja. We're definitely not in Kansas anymore. Magdalena Bay is all the way down here. So getting across the border now, if you're thinking about driving, don't do it because it's not safe. Like the State Department, if you've seen the latest, they've actually acquiesced and given people a little bit more territory where it's safe in Mexico. That's because the businesses are just going absolutely crazy because they see all those red splotches on the chart. Nobody's coming. And a lot of people here depend on tourism and ecotourism, which fly fishing is, for their livelihood. And the rest are trying to get by on a resource which has, especially with the price of fuel going up, diminishing returns. And they're actually starving to death in places. Cabo is not your closest airport. Cabo is almost 5 hours away. Your closest places to come from are from La Paz or Loreto. Okay. It's about a 4 to 4.5 hour drive, depending on where you're going. Mag Bay. The Mag Bay resource itself has more water than San Francisco Bay. Now, we're talking about 170 miles all the way down, right in here, of waterways and paths to explore, do your own thing. If you're driving to the north sections, obviously from La Paz or wherever, it's going to be a lot longer. We actually put in it up in this area here, and it was 4.5 hours in a van ride. Now, we're talking about 170 miles all the way down, right in here, of waterways and paths to explore, do your own thing. If you're driving to the north sections, obviously from La Paz or wherever, it's going to be a lot longer. We actually put in it up in this area here, and it was 4.5 hours in a van ride, dusty, dirty roads. We had to take a couple detours off the one. You know, it's
4.5 hours from where?
La Paz. La Paz. The gear went ahead of us the night before. Camp was mostly pitched. We slept in the sand dunes all week. The sand is so fine, I'm still taking it out of my ears and reels. I want to tear them down when you come home from these big trips. And most of us don't tear them down near enough anyway. But you protect them with baggies and whatever you need to do. So this is your entire, you've got your estuary systems. You have outlets at various points along these bocas, the mouths as they call them, at various points where water gets to flow in and out. And there's even another one down here. So we've got a bunch of different varieties. Up at the top, Boca Los Animas is right here. And your estuary systems, the estros as they call them, take you way back up in there. Okay? We're going to move through these rapidly. Boca Santo Domingo is right here. We're going to talk more about this. You can see this is not going to be a fun place to fish if you don't know what you're doing or if the weather gets rough. It's a lot of current, a lot of water going in and out of there at one time. We're fishing out of kayaks. So if you're not experienced in handling the boat and don't have the judgment built up yet, you got a big trouble. Gary won't go anywhere near the bocas. You're talking, even in the channel in here, the water's 40 feet deep in the main channel and runs at almost 2 knots when the current's moving up to speed. There's a lot of water movement, which is good for fish. It means they eat a lot. Right, so that's what's really cool.
So what's the white strip? Is that sand?
Sand.
Okay.
It takes you 20 minutes to hike across that.
No.
And it's a unique ecosystem, as you'll see from some of the pictures. We've yet to see a rattlesnake, but they're probably there. There are scorpions, which we see. There are coyotes and rabbits and all kinds of other neat things. So that's the sandy area.
Is there a road coming in there from the right?
Yep, that's a road. That's Puerto Lopez Mateos, where we launched out of. There's actually an uncontrolled airport there too. It's got 4,400 feet of runway. Of course, it may or may not be serviceable. There may be holes or chunks in it, but it's probably better than any place else. The road, the last 30 minutes of this road in the vehicle, you're getting bounced around pretty good. Obviously, there's no government funding for maintenance of roads at the current time. Since the 2007, when the hurricane came through, you know, the money is wiped out. The resources in Mexico are strained, certainly in Baja. There's no money at all. Puerto San Carlos is the major port of everything. It's the center of the commercial fishing. They have a big sardine plant, which is based there, as well as a sardine reduction plant. And we'll talk something about that too, but these estros up in here, this is not part of the main flow, by the way. The main channel actually flows up through a narrower passage. But you can see the various features. Apologize because we're going to lose a lot of this in the grain, but the darker water shows your deeper channels. And you've got you've got such a variety of things you can do. It's just been phenomenal. We get down south to Mag Bay itself, a lot deeper. deep blue water. It's a deep water port, great anchorage. You got all kinds of protection. The predominant wind is northwest. Afternoon 15 to 25 is the standard call. That doesn't mean it's like that every day. The week we went, the wind laid down most of the week. We had very little problem with the wind. And once you get back into the mangrove trees, the wind's irrelevant. Those things are, you might as well put up a wall. Just kind of like having a freeway wall. There's no problem with that at all. They protect you pretty well from the wind. Okay, so a lot of water here. I wouldn't even think about going any place without here to explore it myself. Keep going. We're going to go further south. Port El Cancun sits right in here, in this area here. That's the second part of the commercial fishery. A lot of shrimp boats out of here. Further south, actually this is east of San Carlos, Baja San Maria. There's a good fishing village right here, in these estros that go back up in here. I didn't bring any of those pictures, but there's a lot of activity going on here. Yellowtail, white sea bass in the 30, 40 pound range at the right time of year. So you got a chance to tangle some big ones. Now we'll go south to the Clam Bay, as it's known, Baja Mejas. And these are all the clam beds down here in the shallow water. Narrow opening, lots of current. You can see what it does to your bottom. Keeping in mind that what you're looking at today probably won't be like this when you go next year. What you remember from the previous year, if you had a chance to go or any guide went, that's all subject to change in hurricanes. There was a ship that was driven ashore, and the guys took pictures of it. There wasn't even anywhere around. Next year it was already buried in the sand. So you get it's an unprotected fetch into this whole area, which is good for surfing. If you want to take your family surfing, you've got kids or grandkids, there's other things besides fishing going on there at various times of the year. And this is not just a summer fishery. It's a very temperate climate, so it never gets really cold and it never gets really hot either. And I'm sure there are exceptions to both of those. History, discovered in 1539. They left it behind. Why? No water. Wasn't a great source of water. And so they moved on. Vizcaino came in 1602 and actually named it, explored it for about a week, said no water, I'm moving on. They didn't find the springs. There are actually springs there. So they can support that. A Spanish mission eventually found them. And Ferrarquino, who was just like a patron saint of that part of California, so Southern California as it's known at the time, took over and ran it for a good length of time, which considering longevity back then was quite a way. Whaling came in actually in the 1850s, but it was whaling port, Magdalena Bay, didn't begin to take shape until the late 1880s. That's when they were getting rid of the rest of the whaling industry back in New England. They'd already killed off most of the whales back there, and now they were looking out in the Pacific. And the California gray whale was the target. So it went into about 1904. Japanese really went after it. They were going to run an agricultural hub out of it, farming in the desert, and an aquaculture as well, and chase the fishing rights. They wanted that. And there was also another motive by the Japanese as we get a little bit closer to here, and it was for a submarine base. In fact, we were doing some more research, and it's turned up that actually they were planning and may have actually sunk 1 to 2 Japanese submarines that came in there. There was an outlaw contraband kind of running guy, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but rumor has it that he got involved with the locals and they went and had a skirmish with the Japanese and actually sabotaged and damaged at least one of the subs, which never made it back home into the Japanese registry. But the last known sighting was just south of here from the Japanese records. So very interesting. So there was all kinds of clandestine operation going on south of our border. And the Navy, strangely, when I went to look for charts on the area, have charts of Magdalena Bay. What would they be doing with Mexican water charts? Unless they were interested in it themselves or looking for submarines. So, and of course the dates are all from this period. There's no real modern chartage that put out by the U.S. Navy. Commercial fishery is really big there. That took over pretty much about the 1920s. And sardines are the main catch. They pull a lot of sardines out of there. And that's been part of the problem with the system. You can only imagine, based on what it's like today, what Magdalena Bay must have been like before these fisheries got going with all the bait fish. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go along. And what's actually happening to this actually precious resource. And there are some positive steps and things going on. And it certainly shouldn't deter you from going. And I would definitely say go before it's gone. But I think their economy's going to be so collapsed it won't make any difference in the long run. The only reason
What
San
will make a
Carlos...
difference?
the fact that they're overfishing, because they won't be able to sustain that because nobody's buying, and they'll pollute themselves right out of the city with their Puerto San Carlos. I mean, they just can't sustain it. The price of sardines. They used to have about 9 to a can, and there's actually a minimum size of sardines by the Mexican government. Now it's 14 to a can, and they're a lot smaller than the minimum size, and nobody's saying anything. I mean, as you know, whoever has the most money and greases the most skids down there, and it's just the way it is running the show. And the economy down there on the fishery itself, there's 400 to 500 people dependent on these sardines and the shrimp, but at quite a cost. Ecotourism has only recently come in because they discovered once the whales started coming back, everybody wanted to come see them. And we'll talk about the whales, because the whales are a great reason to go down there. And it's a great season to go because it's generally cooler, and there's still lots of fish biting down there. The resources of the bay, we've got the deep water ports, access to the natural anchors we talked about, mild climate, the whales, surfing, birding is huge. Commercial fishing, and of course sport fishing for us. California gray whale went into protection in 1946 when there were only 2,000 remaining, listed as an endangered species in 1970. And today there are more than 30,000 whales, and it has been removed from the list. So that is a success story. There are probably 50 pangueros that are licensed to take people out to check out the whales. And you don't get a better seat. There's the beach you're talking about. I had dolphin come up to my feet where you're sitting, come up, turn around and come up and sit and put their head on the beach, check me out in the morning fishing.
What?
Just sit there and put their head right up, it looked like flipper.
Wow.
Just curious, come around and bring their buddies, and they were playing right at my feet. It was unbelievable.
What part of the bay is that?
This is the channels in the estuary system. It's not even the bay.
Really?
These are the channels. That's the island right there. The water drops here and it goes to about 10 to 20 feet, just boom, and then to 40, real quick.
Is that Lopez Mateo? Is that up in that area?
Yeah. 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 So it's firsthand up close and personal. Sit on the beach and watch them go by, and they're sitting on the west side of the Isla Magdalena, and then the mangroves across, looking to the east. Birds of Magdalena Bay are absolutely everywhere. And of course we were fishing. You know how it is when you're fishing. The blinders come on, you don't always see everything you should see because we're fishing. We're addicts. That's the curse of it. But every time you look up, there was a different species of birds. These are all photographs we took while we were there on this trip. I mean, it was just continuous. Anytime you sat back to take a breath, you had different species of birds in front of you. 234 species. So if you're a birder, it's more than you could ever catalog in a lifetime. If you could identify, I've got the list actually, if you could identify all of them, you would have spent probably a lifetime doing it. And they're back in the mangroves. And then the desert joins that, and you've got ocotillo and all kinds of other plants, and it's a really diverse ecosystem. Never know what you're going to find. The surfing's a real big draw as well. They actually have several surf camps that operate on the island. And you camp on the beach all week, kind of like we were doing, have a support crew and take care of all your needs. The kids can go. It's a completely exposed break to everything from about, I think it's 190 degrees to 275 at various points on Isla Magdalena. So you are going to have
crowded.
waves. No. And some of it is expert only, and some of it is anybody can go down there and boogie board. So you've got enough variety that everybody's going to have a good time. If you're going to surf, I mean, why not?
And does that surfing go on all year long?
Yes, the surf comes from a different direction. Yeah, when I was talking to Gary, looking at Google Earth, I'm looking at how far out the surf line went on the photographs, saying, yeah, we have, our bars go out so far. Theirs went out 3 times further. Why? Because you get these big waves pulling sand off that giant sandbar, essentially. So the channels and nooks and crannies are just everywhere. And he said, no, we've never fished that. It's too windy and the waves are too big. And the surf report was upholding that most of the time. The waves are averaging 8 to 9 feet because there's nothing. It's just really deep water off there, 100-fathom water. And no kelp beds, no nothing. So it's coming right in there and pounding the beach. But they'd never fished it. I think I was the first one of the group to actually fish it. We'll tell that story in a second because it's pretty good.